Are you waiting for someone to validate you? To give you a title or a label? Where in your life are you waiting and seeking external validation? Where do you feel like an imposter? Many of us feel like imposters in our own lives. I think that's why for so many of us, our 40s are really when we start to come into our own. I mean, give or take a couple of years based on your own situation. Our 20s are primarily spent feeling like we're playing grown-ups, and our 30s are spent playing mom. It takes us a while for us to feel the part, to stop looking around for the grown-up in the room to make the decision and realize, oh, wait, I am the grown-up in the room. Professionally, many of us feel like we're imposters for quite a while. Even with the credentials behind our names, we feel like, do we really know what we're doing? Should we be trusted here? In episode 1, a new season begins. I even caught myself. When I listened back to the show, I said something like, I really am an expert. It sounds weird how I said it when I look at it. Almost like, hey, listen to me. I'm an expert. But to be honest, it's actually more me reminding myself, you're literally an expert in this. Like, I have a PhD. I've taught and researched for over 20 years. How much more expert do I expect to be? But I still need to remind myself that I am. I'm a podcaster. That sounds really weird to say, probably because I say it really weird, and I don't think that I would respond in that way or say I'm a podcaster if somebody were to ask me what I do. But I have a podcast. I produce regular episodes of a podcast. I have wonderful listeners of my podcast. I am a podcaster, but I'm not sure that I'm a podcaster yet. Don't I need a certain amount of followers, or to be listed somewhere, or to have sponsors, or to have someone label me a podcaster to claim it, or a professional studio set up, or? We feel like imposters. Rather than just being honest about how unsure we feel about something, rather than saying, do I sound good? Do I sound like I know what I'm talking about? Do I hold people's attention? Do I inform my listeners? Do I entertain my listeners? Do I actually have listeners? Do people like me? Do people like my podcast? Rather than admitting those insecurities, we look for external validation. We don't consider ourselves a runner because, well, we only run a really slow pace a few times a week. It's not like I'm running marathons. You're running, you're a runner. It's not like there's a threshold for how many miles per week or how many miles per hour you need to run to officially become a runner. You run, you're a runner. Oh, I'm not an artist. I just draw a little bit here and there for fun. You're creating art. No, it's not in a museum or a gallery, but it's art, right? Lots of art has never been in a museum or a gallery. You're an artist. You're intelligent. You're capable. You're knowledgeable. You're beautiful. You're amazing, and you don't need anyone to validate that. So stop waiting for it. Don't wait for someone to give you the title or the label. Just take it and own it. Where in your life are you waiting and seeking external validation? You don't need anyone's permission but your own. Hey guys, it's Jen. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a topic that relates heavily to raising teenagers. But interestingly, I don't teach it in my family communication class. I never really thought about teaching it in family comm. I do teach it regularly, though. I just teach it in my persuasion class, which is actually really fascinating to me because I've never even seen it in family comm textbooks. But one of the reasons that I am, in love with this praxis approach to teaching things is that just like the research informs the practice, sometimes the practice or living in action can influence the theory part of it too. So So my daughter lied to me. It was just a small lie. I caught her lying, but I didn't say anything at first. And she came to me pretty soon after and came clean because she said she didn't want to lie to me, but she did. It's not something that my kids ever do. And no, my kids aren't perfect. And yes, I'm well aware that they could be lying to me and I could just be lying to myself about the fact that they're not. But overall, I'm going to go with I'm pretty sure that my kids don't lie. But do they lie? Do I lie to them? Do I lie to my husband? Does he lie to me? Do we lie to ourselves? Do we lie to ourselves about lying to ourselves or to others or others to us? I mean, sometimes it's just a teeny tiny little lie, or I didn't really lie. I just didn't share that particular part. It gets confusing, right? Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. So I digress. Back to the lie. It was just a little silly lie that she told me, telling me that she was just going down to the pond at the end of our street, when she was in fact cutting through the yard to the next street to stop at a boys from school's house. That sounds worse than it was even. She only rang the doorbell and left something there. She wasn't there more than a minute or two. And she knows that I have Life 360 alerts set up, so I knew exactly what was up. But she didn't tell me that she was going there, so she lied. Why? And why does a girl who is comfortable enough to ask me anything, and oh, do I mean anything? The other day's drive home from school included a pretty detailed, "Mom, is it true that when gay guys have sex?" discussion. Oh, yes, that was super fun. You want to talk about having difficult or uncomfortable conversations with our teens? And there, as a side note, if you'd like to tap into those tough conversations, check out the Emotional Comfort Zone episode. But before us get past the story, I do have to tell you my very favorite part of that car conversation was her asking me, "Why didn't you tell me this?" It never came up, and neither of us are gay men, so it seemed irrelevant. Anyway, she's clearly comfortable talking to me, but she lied about this little thing. Why? Well, I can tell you exactly why. She knew what she was doing was wrong, and she felt bad and knew that I would be her conscience. But she was doing it not because she wanted to. She was doing it because her friend was over at our house and she wanted to do it. A friend, mind you, who is a new friend and one I neither trust nor am a fan of. And this is Exhibit 52 on why I'm not a fan. So that gets us to our topic for today. We're going to have a conversation about deception and your teens. Teenagers lie, and some of you are dealing with this more than others, and much bigger lies, I know, than the one that I was dealing with her. So I get that it's a lot more serious for a lot of you. You know, lying is a type of storytelling. It's an attempt to control the narrative and frame the situation that someone finds themselves in. What happened or is happening or will happening or will happen, or what didn't happen. Now, the power or strength of the lie is determined by a combination of two things: how convincing the storyteller is in the lie, and how much the receiver of the lie wants to believe that the story is true, or how gullible the receiver is. Parents typically see lying as being like a moral problem, which makes it especially disturbing to us, primarily because we internalize it. We have worked so hard to teach them good morals and good values, and now here they are lying to us. We have clearly failed as parents, right? Well, not really, because the reality is, for teens, lying is more a practical issue than a moral one. Chances are you did teach them good morals and values, and they in fact know that lying is wrong. But the reality is they either need to get out of something bad or they want to do something that is forbidden, and they just don't see another option beyond lying. But you won't be in trouble if you tell me the truth, you might say. But is that the truth? Or are you lying and they will, in fact, be in some type of trouble? Even if it's not a punishment per se, maybe you'll still judge them or look at them differently. And to your teen, that means they're still in trouble. Or does your teen see that as a lie and they don't want to risk actually being in trouble? Regardless, they feel like this is their only way out or to get what they want, so they lie. Okay, so let's jump over to a bit of the theory part to understand what the research looks at. Colloquially, we refer to lying, but really, lying is only one specific type of the much broader deception. And then deception is essentially just a type of persuasion. It involves an intentional attempt to get someone to believe what the liar knows to be false. So essentially, you're trying to persuade someone to believe you. It aims at influencing our beliefs, our attitudes, our behaviors by deliberately distorting the meaning of something. So why do you lie? What motivates people to lie? So there's a lot of things. You might tell a lie to benefit someone else. If you get a gift and you don't like it, but you're a good gift getter, you tell them how much you love it, how gorgeous it is. Oh, this is so great. You lie to benefit the other person to make them feel better. But is that a lie? Yeah, it's a lie. You might lie to affiliate, to feel like you have something in common with the person. Oh, have you watched this show? Well, or have you seen the movie? Oh, yeah. You lie to feel like you don't want to stand out from them. You want to affiliate with them. A lie to avoid an invasion of privacy. Maybe you don't think it's anyone's business how old you are or how much you weigh. So you lie because it's an invasion of privacy for you to tell the truth. You might lie to avoid conflict. If you know that something is going to cause a problem, you might be motivated to lie to avoid that conflict, or lying to appear better, or to protect yourself, to benefit yourself. Those are all reasons why your teens might lie. To look better in your eyes, to protect themselves, to get something that benefits them. Or we might lie maliciously to harm someone else. Now, when we lie, there's 3 different strategies we use. We might distort the information, or we might falsify information, or we oftentimes omit information. So we're not really lying, right? We just didn't include that part. Now, when we're talking with other people, we typically assume the best. We assume that they're going to be cooperative, that they're providing us the information that is truthful, that it is informative, it's relevant, it's clear. We don't talk to other people assuming that they're lying to us. Now, because of that, they can alter in any combination or amount, they can alter 4 different things. They can alter the quantity of information that they're giving you. They can alter the quality of information. Or there can be what's called a manner violation, which means that they're giving you messages that are like vague or ambiguous. So they're not lying per se by falsifying information, but the information that they're giving you is a bit vague that could kind of cover a lot. Or by a relation violation, which means that they're giving you messages that are irrelevant instead of giving you the ones that are relevant that then would have to be falsified. So the deceptive behavior in these lying, there's different things that people do that they behave differently when they're lying. And so a theoretical model of deceptive behavior, the 4-factor model, looks at 4 different factors about why people behave differently when they're lying. So they might get more aroused or anxious when lying. They might try to control their behaviors, right? And so we tend to be able to see behaviors in their head, in their body, more so than their head, because they're trying to limit the movement. They're trying to limit, changing the eye contact or their facial expression, but things are still like kind of slipping out through their body movements. There are affective factors like guilt. And so you can kind of sometimes, see guilt on someone's face. They might have less facial pleasantness, or they might make more negative remarks, or there might be cognitive factors. Okay. It requires more thinking, longer response times, more pauses, less specifics. And so, because of those 4 different factors, there are certain things you can look for or try to use when trying to detect a lie from someone. And so, we'll get to that in a second. So, interpersonal deception theory says that deception is an interactional phenomenon that involves both senders and receivers. Okay, so the person telling the lie as well as the person receiving the lie, and the encoding and decoding of messages so that communication interaction, there are strategic and non-strategic behaviors. So a strategic behaviors would be like that you're manipulating the information in the messages to kind of disassociate yourself with it as the sender. You're trying to control your behaviors to suppress any kind of cues that you might give to make it seem like you're lying. And you might manage your image to the receiver of your lie by smiling or nodding in order to seem credible in what you're saying, but you're not credible because you're making it up. And then there are non-strategic behaviors in this deception, and that's behaviors that leak out beyond our control. So we can only control so much of our body, and sometimes those like behaviors leak out, and those are the non-strategic behaviors. Some people are better liars than other people, and it's based on a lot of personality characteristics or communication characteristics. For example, like the Machiavellianism. So if you know, like Machiavellianism is a trait that is a personality trait that it's like the whole ends justifies the means kind of thing. So how much is the person Machiavellian? Okay, so like, are they the kind of person that in general thinks that the ends justifies the means? People who are more like that or higher on that scale are going to be better liars because they can justify to themselves that it's okay. People with certain higher social skills, right? If you are a more sociable person, you can be a better liar. Similarly, those who are good at communicating basic emotions or high self-monitors, right? I don't think it means I'm a good liar, I guess, but I'm a high self-monitor, and I know that a lot of you are too. It's where you're constantly looking at your own behavior and your own actions and monitoring things to imagine how the person that you're communicating with will take it. People who are very expressive and very socially tactful, or who are very competent communicators, who are attentive and like friendly in their communication, those people are all going to be much better liars. Now, some lies themselves are better than others. If you have the time to prepare for a lie, it's going to be much harder for your receiver to detect, right? Spontaneous lies are a lot harder. So if someone calls you out on something and you have to come up with the lie on the spot, it's going to be a lot harder, and it's going to be a lot easier for them to tell that you're lying. If you have the time to come up with the lie, then it's going to be much more prepared, and it's going to be much harder for the person you're lying to detect. Also, the length and content of the lie. Longer lies are much harder to tell. There's a lot more factors at play. There's a lot more dimensions to it, and that's why, the grand rule of lying is, right, just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. Don't make up all of these elaborate points and storylines and plot twists and such to your lie. They're going to be much more easily detected by people. Similarly, if you are trying to determine if someone is lying to you, longer lies are much easier to detect. And it's easier to lie about personally relevant information than neutral information. So you can much more easily make up information or tell lies about subjective information than objective information, which is why when I make up exams, and I assume, it's funny, I've never asked any of my colleagues this, but I find multiple choice tests really hard to write because I have a really hard time. If you have 4 answers and one is the correct one and the other 3 are incorrect or false answers, I have a really hard time coming up with fake answers for objective information. If you ask them to, what theory, and give the definition of a theory, and then it's I have a really hard time making up, well, what other theories could it sound like enough that they might think that that was the answer, but not, because essentially making up exams, I'm trying to deceive them, I guess, on the different answers. So it's much easier to lie about personally relevant or subjective information than it is to lie about neutral or objective information. You also have to take into account, when someone's lying, how motivated the liar is to succeed. Right? There's something called the motivational impairment effect, and that says that people who are overly motivated to lie it may cause them to be especially detectable to you. So it's kind of like that high stakes thing. When the stakes are really high, there's a lot more pressure, and so it becomes really hard to lie. If the stakes are really low, then there's a lot less pressure, and we can pull off the lie a lot easier. So I said we'd get back to this. How do you detect deception in someone? Are there specific kind of cues that you can look for? So based on how we integrated a variety of verbal and nonverbal information, you can kind of detect how likely it is that this person is lying, right? So if they are doing verbal and nonverbal stuff, they're stuttering, okay? Stuttering is kind of one of those, unless they are a stutterer, that's kind of one of those things that it's pretty obvious kind of cue based on verbal or nonverbal information. Your past knowledge from the person. If you have actual knowledge about, well, he doesn't really ever go there, or he doesn't really ever go out late at night, those kind of things, you can more easily detect their deception. Inference, I just kind of feel like he seems a little bit nervous. Those kind of things can, the cues can work together to help us figure out if someone is lying to us. The old, they can't lie if they're making eye contact. Look at me in the eyes when you say that. That doesn't work. That doesn't mean anything. But there are some physical cues you can look for. Touching or itching a nose. That actually, when you lie, your stress level goes up. And so part of that is that your nose starts to get warm. And when your nose starts to get warm, it starts to get a little bit itchy. And so people have a tendency to touch their nose in an itching fashion, I guess, when they're lying. Hiding your hands, because hands, remember we said, it's easier to control our facial expressions and such when we're lying, but it's harder. We kind of have those things kind of seep out through our body. And so our hands are a place that we're oftentimes making movements or gestures that show our actual behavior. And so hiding our hands means that we're trying to hide those cues that might be seeking out. And so that's a cue that you can look for. Or closing your eyes. If someone closes their eye, and I don't mean standing there with their eyes closed, but if they close their eyes for a second or two, that's a cue that they are lying. Right. And so, people are usually unaware of the cues that they actually see and actually use. And so you can kind of look for signs of uncertainty or indifference in these kind of cues. it's interesting because our relationship with the person who may be lying to us can totally impact our ability to detect if they're lying. So when you're judging lies about information, friends are much more accurate in determining if someone is lying than a stranger is. Okay, that makes sense. You know the person more. However, the more interesting thing is spouses detect lies at the same rate that strangers do. So strangers and spouses, so like the two opposite ends of the spectrum, the people that don't know us and the people who know us the best, those two groups of people have the hardest time detecting lies from us. But friends, so kind of like that middle group, have the most accuracy in detecting lies from people. Okay, the reason is that, obviously it's obvious why strangers have a harder time predicting our lies, but people who are very close to us, there's like a truth bias. Right? And so that familiarity increases our confidence about how we are at judging their honesty. Okay. And so we think that we have positive relationships. And so because of that, we just assume that they're being honest with us. There's that truth bias. Similarly, if you have a negative relationship with someone you're close to, like an ex-spouse, right, there's a lie bias. And so you automatically assume that the person is lying to you. So familiarity mostly helps by providing kind of like that background information. Like, things, like you can pick up on, they don't usually talk that way, or they're talking at a different rate than they usually do. Or wait a minute, did he just say that he went to, I know he doesn't go there, or any of those kind of things. There is background information with that familiarity. And so we're able to detect it a little bit. Now, according to interpersonal deception theory, if people become suspicious that they're being lied to when you're interacting with someone, then they start to behave particular ways. So if you all of a sudden are like, wait, I think he's lying to me. Suspicious people use things like shorter responses. They take longer to answer questions. They too start to like manage their body movements more. And then the person who is lying to them, then they notice the change in the receiver. And so they then change their behavior. And so just like communication is an interaction between the sender and the receiver, and they're encoding and decoding messages, this is how the deception, it's like, wait, I think you're lying to me. So then my behavior starts to change. And then they know, wait, they're acting weird all of a sudden. So then the liar's behavior starts to change. And so it's this, this cycle. Now, when you are trying to determine if somebody is lying, it's you can't really probe them too much. Because if a liar won't talk, because like, wait, now all of a sudden you're asking all these questions. If you can't get answers or can't get information out of them, it's hard to find inconsistencies, right? But on the other hand, if you do ask a lot of questions and there's a probing effect that the more questions you ask, the more a person looks like they're telling the truth, because, we know that it's hard to keep up a lie. And so there's kind of like a probing heuristic here that, they can't possibly, if I keep asking questions in different ways and from different angles and I'm framing it in different manners, then they must be telling the truth, because it would be really hard to keep up that lie with all of these different questions. So probing, we can kind of see, are they able to keep up the story? Are they able to answer different questions in a same kind of manner type thing? And then also there's a cognitive approach to it, that when you are lying, it is really taxing on you mentally. And so if you increase cognitive demands more, liars are going to have a hard time telling the truth. So a lot of times in interrogations, I remember at this one conference I went to a number of years ago, I went to this whole seminar on lying, and it was so fascinating because it was like former people from like CIA and FBI, and they were talking about like how they interrogated people and knew if people were lying. And that was one of the things they said, is that they would make them do like cognitive tasks, like do a word search or something that made them think while they were telling them a story or answering questions, because you can tell it's hard to do two things mentally, and you can tell the truth and do something else, but it's really hard to make up a lie, because lying is mentally taxing while you're doing some other cognitive behavior. And so it is, it's easier to detect if someone is lying when you increase the cognitive load on them. Similarly, to get someone to go back and tell something in chronological order is a lot more challenging too. Like, okay, start at the beginning and go through the chronological order of it. It's a lot harder to get through those specifics cognitively. And so when you are questioning somebody, it's also good to, and this goes back to that probing kind of thing, to ask questions in different ways. See what responses there are in different ways, or ask questions that are unanticipated, because we said those prepared lies, those are much easier to get away with. So if you ask a question that's kind of like unanticipated, then that maybe wasn't something that they prepared for. And the spontaneous lies, remember, are much easier to detect. So this kind of helps us out when you are trying to determine if your teenagers are lying. So why are we dealing with this so much now? Why does lying happen so much at this stage of life? They lied when they were younger, right? It was just cuter and sweeter and less dangerous. In fact, I remember the first time that my daughter lied to me. She was probably about 4. And she wrote, I guess about 4, I'd have to look back. She wrote in sidewalk chalk across our front walkway in very big letters. She wrote ass, ASS, love Cain, her brother. We all knew that Cain didn't write it for a variety of reasons. We all knew it was a lie, but it was flippin' adorable, right? It made Facebook and Instagram, did the whole rounds of social media. Maybe I'll even pull up the picture and share it again. But a 4-year-old lying about writing a bad word in chalk on our sidewalk and blaming her 5-year-old brother is funny. A 13-year-old lying about her whereabouts isn't. And a 15-year-old lying about going to a party instead of a movie isn't. And a 16-year-old lying about using drugs absolutely isn't. So the lying moves from, aw, this is cute, to this is a problem as they get older, and it escalates to this is a serious issue as it gets much more dangerous. But this life stage is one that is ripe for lies, because it's the point where there is a struggle for control. Primarily, it's a struggle for control over decision making. When they're little, children think that parents have the power to actually make them do things and stop doing things. The counting 1, 2. I did that all the time, and I was never actually sure what was going to happen if I got to 3, because I didn't get there because they believed that there was actually something that was going to happen and that I could actually make them do it. Now, as teenagers, they've come to the very accurate realization that any degree of parental control that exists is completely dependent on the teen's willingness to cooperate with us. Similarly, when children are small, they believe that parents should be told everything, and that we can tell when we aren't being told everything. The moms have eyes in the back of their heads, right? Moms just know. Well, as they become teenagers, they realize that parents depend on them to find out what's going on in their lives. It depends on how defiant the teen becomes in their thinking that what I tell them is up to me, and abuses having this power over parents. And all teens are going to lie at some point, and most all will get caught at some point. So what do? Okay, well, you need to confront the situation. You need to do it with solid communication that includes, why did you lie? How does it feel when someone lies to you? And how do you think it feels to know that you lied to me? And you're also going to need to talk about the breach in trust that's now there. This takes us back to an early episode 3, I think it is, on family rules. Remember, we talked about implicit and explicit rules. Was we don't lie an explicit rule? Meaning, did you specifically tell them, do not lie to me? Or was it more of an implicit rule? You just assumed that they knew, but it wasn't addressed as being a rule until it was broken. But either way, you'll need to remember that if a rule is broken, there must be a sanction. Otherwise, it stops being a rule. So, in addition to this discussion, there must be some type of sanction, even if it's just your disappointment in them or your anger with them or an actual punishment. Obviously, depending on the rule violation, there has to be some type of sanction. Otherwise, you're shooting yourself in the foot because it's going to stop being a rule. But even if the punishment isn't a tangible, you can't go out with your friends this weekend, and instead is more of like an intangible, you've let us down. You need to be careful navigating the personal feelings that you have of hurt and upset. And honestly, we feel embarrassment, right? Some degree of embarrassment, because even if it's not in a public forum, it is embarrassing to have our kids disappoint us, whether it's by lying or some other behavior. We take it personally, we feel like a failure, and we're embarrassed about that failure, okay? But we can't get all caught up in our feelings about this and tell them something like a knee-jerk reaction, like, you need to earn back our trust. Okay, right? That's the age-old parenting response. No, just a hard no on that, right? Go with me on this. What happens when you tell that to your child? When you tell your child, you need to earn back our trust, rather than an you're innocent until proven guilty type thing, now it's a guilty until you prove yourself innocent situation in your house. How do you think that works out for you? And yes, I'm talking about you, not your relationship with them or how it makes them feel. I'm talking about you. It places you into a horrible position of constantly feeling distrust of your child, intentionally placing yourself into an awful state of anxiety. And I know I have enough anxiety. I don't need to put myself in an intentional state of anxiety. And that's not fair to you. You shouldn't feel that way. You shouldn't feel distrustful of your children. You shouldn't feel anxiety in your relationship. You didn't even do anything wrong. All right, and then let's talk about your teen and your relationship with them moving forward from that hardline approach. What benefit is there to being honest with you at this point? If they're not going to believe me, why even tell them the truth, they might think, right? This sets up for a horribly strained relationship between you and them. So this is where communication comes in. This is when, as parents, you need to recognize that this is one of those system changes that we've talked about, as well as those difficult conversations that we talked about. The reality is your children will always be your children. But those adages those old time adages about parents having the ability to control kids' behavior and needing to be told everything about kids' lives, well, those just aren't true anymore. This is why we constantly talk about the need to adapt to our changing family structures, that morphogenesis. If we don't, and we get stuck parenting our teens as if they were children, the relationship will not be as well functioning. And lower functioning relationships are more prone to problems, such as lying. So how does a growing parent-child relationship need to adapt in this situation? They need to communicate. They need to have more of an egalitarian relationship. Yes, your teen needs you to be their parent. Totally get that. You need to hold them accountable for breaking the rules. Totally. But it needs to be emphasized as to why the no lying rule is in fact a rule. Imagine what this family would be like if we all lied to each other. Or no one likes to be lied to. Just as you expect the truth from us, we expect the truth from you. The no lying rule needs to be discussed and enforced. Totally. Then, perhaps, and the harder part, what did they lie to you about? Because that may be the real rule or issue that you need to deal with. It might require building more of a relationship with them. You may need to disclose things to them, and then they may need to disclose things to you. Okay? Again, it's a more equal, a more egalitarian, a more on the same playing field relationship. Or maybe it's the rule that they're breaking and then lying about that's outdated for them and needs to be adjusted. Or maybe it's troublesome behaviors that are the ones that actually need to be punished or addressed. It's not the lying about the beer that is the big issue here. It's the underage drinking of the beer that is the problem. And that's the real problem because, again, if a rule goes unpunished, it ceases being a rule. And beer turns into weed, and weed turns into harder drugs. But that's the type of thing that requires a conversation. Why is the rule no drinking alcohol? Well, first, it's illegal, and there are actually laws and punishments for it. I mean, my kids know that. That's why I would say, no drinking, because it's illegal. Right? They've had Prosecco in Amsterdam and champagne in Paris and wine in Italy because it wasn't illegal. So for me, that's personally the angle that I push. Things progress quickly and behaviors move from simply illegal to both illegal and very dangerous. Regardless of your approach to the conversation, there needs to be a conversation about the underlying behavior beyond the lying. And it needs to be a dialogue, not a monologue. Maybe it's an issue that you can actually hear what they have to say and make changes to rules that may make them more involved in the process. You don't let them go to parties where parents or adults aren't present. Okay, I totally get that. But to get around that, they lie and tell you that they are going to the movies, but then they go to the party. Or they lie and tell you that a parent will be there, but they're not. What's the underlying issue? Well, the issue is that the unparented party at 16 is a problem. Is it the behavior that others will potentially be doing that's problematic with you? Are you concerned that his presence there will potentially get him in trouble? Talk to him about that. Do you not trust her behavior? Do you think that she'll drink? Do you think that she'll be drunk and find herself in a compromised position because of it? Talk to her about it. From there, you can work together to resolve the issue and compromise on the solutions, which, yes, compromise means that you are going to need to budge. One of the biggest behaviors that parents do that pushes their teens away is to clamp down on them when they start to show independence. Instead, you might need to offer them opportunities to help make the rules. You can use that as like a jumping off point for them to manage some degree of responsibility and to see that they are making good decisions. And it also makes it a lot less likely they're going to break rules if they're the rules that they made. And it's often the families with the strictest rules who have teens who are the biggest liars. Strict parents lead to rebellious teens. Rebellious teens lie because they are under such strict rules that they manage to find ways to break them all. Realistically, when there are few rules, it's a big deal to break one. Many rules, not such a big deal to break them. And I do truly believe that many strict parents aren't necessarily being strict because they want to be mean. They may feel like they are doing the right thing, like trying to protect their children. But when you're imposing especially strict rules, it can force teens to deceive you and to damage the honesty in that parent-child relationship. We also can't leave out the whole psychological reactance aspect either. When someone is told not to do something, it only increases their desire to do it. And then, if they get caught, they're forced to lie about it or they'll get in trouble. So, if parents maintain strict rules without adapting to the changing needs for independence that teens have, these teens are more likely to actually engage in oftentimes even riskier behavior. So, if we go back to the example of not being allowed to attend the parentless party, well, a teen may get sneaky and leave their phone to not be tracked or to turn off their tracker on their phone. They're still going to the party. Only now it becomes even riskier because if they do find themselves in a bad situation, they can't call you for help. Or you can't find where they are because they're not able to be tracked. Risky behavior then becomes even riskier behavior. Setting a hard line on no sex until marriage, and no, you cannot have access to birth control. Hardline approach. If they do, in fact, rebel against the rule and have sex, then the risky behavior of teen sex becomes the even riskier behavior of unprotected sex. Don't forget the deception then that goes along with these risky situations too. Yes, your teens still need rules, but research supports that parents being open to debate and negotiation rather than imposing strict standards and laying down the law have stronger relationships with their children and the teens. In the teens, they're psychologically healthier. That is a win-win to me.
Thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate you spending this time with me. Please remember to follow the show so that you don't miss out on any new content. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends who might also benefit from or enjoy it, because that's how we will grow our community. Reach out to me on socials, on Instagram and TikTok at Reframing Me. And on Facebook, it's Reframing Me, and join the Facebook group, Reframing Me, the podcast community, to connect with other women who are also raising teens and rediscovering themselves. Until next time, be well, communicate, and embrace the hard.